In a world where God is dying, 4 heathens come to deliver the final nails in the coffin. From the depths of hell, Satan sends 4 puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists from the Middle East.
Hello everyone, welcome to our episode of Secular Jihadists. We have the same usual suspects, except that Armin got a fairer skin today. Did you do whitening, Armin? Are you trying to become like Michael Jackson, Armin?
He's got a vitiligo. He's been flossing a lot.
Yeah, I can see that.
You guys, he's been throwing up. He's been sick.
I have had food poisoning.
Oh, I see. I thought you were using Fair and Lovely.
And wait, not only was he sick, but he still came out to see me in my talk.
Wow.
And he came out to brunch afterwards.
Nice.
While
That's
being
amazing.
sick. Such an amazing friend. I'm very lucky.
He's a true jihadist.
We should talk about that soon. So the usual suspects, we have Yasmin Muhammad, Confessions of an Ex-Muslim. Hello, Yasmin.
Hello, Faisal. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. This is the first time we meet. I didn't want our first date to be this confusing.
Yeah, because you're not mahram. You're not mahram.
You're not mahram. Yeah.
I will be soon because I can breastfeed you and then we'll be fine.
Oh
Okay,
my
good.
God.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. That's a win-win situation.
Oh my God.
And with us also, we have the sick Armin, Armin Navabi. He is the...
Hello.
Hello, Armin. He is the founder of Atheist Republic and the author of No God But God, co-authored with Raza Aslan.
No. No.
Armin's like, no.
Armin's book is called Why There Is No God.
Yes. Thank you.
That's the other one that he co-authored with a fellow Iranian, Raza Aslan, who I think Armin is a big fan.
No.
Well, you're
Wrong.
You're not
That's
the
your
one.
karma, Faisal.
It's backfiring on me right now.
Yes, that's right.
I've raised bad generation.
You earned it.
And we have Al-Rizvi, the author of The God Delusion. No. Well, the author of The Selfish Gene and The God Delusion. No, that's another brown person. No, he's not. The author of The Atheist Muslim, The Journey from Reason to Faith, right?
Other way around.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's the Atheist Muslim, A Journey from Religion to Reason. I can't believe I have to do this, but anyway. So,
Well,
I know you're having
even bad marketing is good marketing.
that's
as
the
the-
idea. That's
the president of the United States.
that's
Faisal,
exactly what I
what's
was
my
going to say.
potential book going to be called?
Why I Love Linda Sarsour.
No,
10
definitely wrong. That's so good, though. I'm really impressed with you.
Like a BuzzFeed article.
Well done.
Why do I love 10 reasons why I love Linda Sarsour?
It's like a listicle. That's what they call them, listicles.
Testicles of Linda Sarsour.
Oh my God.
It's
You
going
are
to be
such-
called From Al-Qaeda to Atheism.
Faisal, you are such a gentleman.
Oh my God.
We devolved so quickly.
Yeah.
We didn't even get the podcast started yet. We have important people listening to this.
Yeah, I know.
think anybody that was trying to decide whether this is a podcast worth listening to, they just... If this was the first episode, I don't know if you're still here, thank you so much.
If you brought
We
your
love
nice
you,
kids
patrons.
and everybody sit around and let's watch this right now. This is probably not.
Yeah.
There should have been a trigger warning.
Yeah, if you are a teacher of a kindergarten, this is the best show to show to future children, future generations.
Future children. There's going to be an embryo screening.
Yeah. Speaking of embryos.
There we go.
One of the verses of the Quran that talks about that the sperm is created on the back of the man. And there was a friend of ours that I think Al-Rizvi's best friend.
Let me clear up what the verse actually says, because this is a serious thing. This is Surah 86 verses 5-7. Say that look at man was created from a fluid ejected between the backbone and the ribs. So
I
that's
like
wrong,
ribs.
by the way. That's
I like
wrong.
ribs.
Not those ribs. So before we dive into this and we start talking about embryos, let's talk about what the theme of this episode is. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have some fun with all of the scriptures. One reason that all of us are secular, we're not religious, and we're atheists is because all of us ended up reading our scriptures and the scriptures of pretty much all the Abrahamic religions in a way. I mean, none of us really converted to Judaism or Christianity either, because we know that, those scriptures are just as silly. The scriptures are all silly. I mean, you can argue which religion has been more dangerous at different times in history, but the scriptures are all, they're very entertaining, and they're actually a lot more fun. Armin, you have something to say about this too. They're a lot more fun when you stop believing, right?
Yeah,
Don't stop.
No. Oh my God, that's gonna get stuck in my head.
Don't stop. Yeah, you can't get that song out of your head. Don't stop believing.
Yeah, that
Don't
and
stop.
Frozen. Oh my God.
You can't get Frozen out of your head? Ooh,
No.
wait, let's forget about all the scripture stuff. I
No.
want to hear more.
Let it go.
Okay.
صليل الصوارم that's my favorite Frozen song.
I know. Yeah, no, this Faisal's gonna come in with all the
It's a
ISIS
different
tunes.
movie.
All right. So what I was suggesting is, like, if somebody enjoys like Mayan culture and Mayan history, and Mayan art and all that, that doesn't necessarily mean that they believe in human sacrifice, right? They don't think that's a good idea, but nobody criticizes somebody that enjoys Mayan history and Mayan culture, because they know that these people just enjoy the history and culture of it, and they don't actually believe in any of the ideas that the religion actually taught their followers before. So what I'm suggesting is that when we become an ex-Muslim, a lot of us at the beginning have this hatred towards Islam that don't want to even go near it. But if
Speak for yourself.
if you get over that after a while, a lot of us, when we go back to it, we look at it from a sense of from a point of view of non-belief, and we just look at it as history and literature. It actually becomes very interesting. But if you take out the part that you actually believe these things are real and serious, it becomes like a lot of these verses, along with other verses from other religions, and also the teachings and the culture around that time, and the reasons why one verse might have appeared before another, it becomes actually like a puzzle that you have to solve, and you never know if you got it right. And every chapter in the Quran or even the Hadith become very, very interesting, actually, if you don't actually believe in them. And it becomes much more enjoyable. I have much more fun reading the Quran as an atheist than I ever had as a Muslim.
Yeah, and I would say the same about the Bible. I actually think the Bible is even more interesting, because there's all these because we see that culture all around us in the literature and in paintings, and like even it was Passover recently, and then you look at the history of Passover and you gotta laugh. Like, do you guys know? Are you familiar with it? Like,
Yeah, I've dated enough Jews to know.
yeah, you have. I know.
Yeah.
So just for those who don't know, I mean, the idea was that what God was doing was he was kind of like purging all of the bad people, the firstborns. He was killing all the firstborns of the bad people. So he was going from.
There's something about blood on a door or something.
Yeah, so he was going from house to house, and all of the believers were told to slaughter a lamb and put the blood of the lamb on the front of their door. So he knew when he saw the blood of the lamb that he would pass over that house and not kill the firstborn in that house. And this now is a celebration. So it's
Not
another
a very
thing.
smart God if he needs the people to be
Yeah,
telling
no,
him.
I know the excuse for that. The excuse for that is that it wasn't God that showed up at the door; it was the angel of death.
It was
So
a
you
spirit.
he's pretty
yes,
stupid
it
too.
was. It
Like
was,
he
yeah.
should be
but-
able to figure his shit out.
I know, but still, you're allowed to criticize the angel of death. So
So,
you could
but
be like,
but
he's
the
an idiot.
what I wanted to add to what Armin was saying, that not only does it become more interesting, and it actually becomes funnier too. There's a lot of things we grew up. Like I think that the last episode we were talking about how there's an angel on the right shoulder, an angel on the left shoulder, and then they're writing down our deeds, and the whole thing is just so laughable now. So it becomes very entertaining, and that is, I think, the theme of what we're gonna do over here is maybe we're probably gonna have some laughs at some of the silliness and the absurdity of scripture. If you are just a disclaimer, if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I'm Muslim and I find this offensive, we're not talking about you. This isn't about you.
We're talking about your silly religion.
Yeah, even if you were born in the 60s or 70s, I mean, this happened 1400 years ago. This is not about you and what you know, who you are. We have a lot of respect for you. This is just about a book and a bunch of really funny stuff that's in that book, like human beings being created from a fluid ejected between the backbone and the ribs.
And was that fluid clay? Because I thought human beings were made out of clay.
No,
There's a discrepancy there.
I thought they were made of kebabs.
also water?
no, they were originally, the first human was made out of clay. Not everybody else was not made out of clay. Everybody else was made out of like clay of blood, right?
Okay, so the first one was made out. Okay, how does this work? You make the first one out of clay, and then so his offspring would also be clay, would they not?
No, they start from a clot of blood, from alaka. And alaka
So-
is a clinging leech-like structure, apparently, that also looks like a blood clot. And I know how they got the blood clot.
But then,
Yes.
like if you,
I read your book, Ali. I didn't know that until I read your book. It was pretty.
I remember that
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
remember being taught that this. Oh, look, it's just like an embryo. Look how it's hanging in the womb or the whatever the
Well,
that
the
sack that the
alaka,
baby is in.
well, the leech-like structure.
can't
So
remember
what
what it's
happens
called.
is in the I think the first revelation ever. So Muhammad's out there. He's in the cave.
Iqra
Of,
bismika allazi khalaq.
right, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, Iqra
Yeah.
bismi rabbika alladhi khalaqa. And he's in a cave in Mecca, the cave of Hira, and he's meditating or whatever he's doing. And then an angel comes to him. Which it's obviously this cannot be a hallucination because he was a prophet. Just want to say that right now. And
He
tells
wasn't
him,
smoking pot either.
yeah, he tells him to read. He's like, read. And he's like, I don't know how to read. He's like, read. He's like, hey, I don't know how to read. I just told you. And the guy's just like, read. He's so it's clearly something up with Gabriel. And Muhammad suddenly starts reading. And then the first thing, so that first revelation ever of the Quran, which started off the Quran, was read in the name of thy Lord who created you from a clot. And the miracle here is supposed to be that how did people know that the embryo initially looks like a blood clot? That's not really much of a miracle because when we were in Pakistan, we sometimes would get eggs and we'd crack them open, frying pan, and sometimes they were fertilized and you knew that you had to throw them out because lo and behold, there was a blood clot looking thing. And that was how we knew it was a fertilized egg. Pretty sure they had eggs back there. Pretty sure they had chickens 1400 years ago. And someone put that together. Not much of a miracle. Anyway.
So one of our patrons just wrote, and Wendell wrote and said, Adam is made from clay and Eve is made from Adam's rib.
Or his penis bone, according to Zaini Zevit.
Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of explains how people can be. So we should be like, we should be partially clay and partially blood clot. There should be clay in us. I was told, you want me to tell you how this was explained to me when I asked that question?
Please.
I was told that when the Big Bang happened, all of the particles of like the different. Okay, guys, I've been drinking wine, so my vocabulary's gone.
Oh. Well, the people who wrote this stuff were drinking a whole lot more than just wine. Yeah.
So all of the little like stuff, all of that stuff is what makes clay. And then that's what like when people say we're made out of star stuff, like we're made out of star stuff and clay is also made out of star stuff. So yeah, it makes sense.
Oh, that's the justification. They brought Lawrence Krauss into it, and
Yes.
they were able to justify the
Actually,
Quranic claim.
if you want to justify these verses, there's so many ways to do it. Like when I was a kid, I came up with something, and a lot of my teachers thought it was very clever, and I felt very special because my religion teachers were like, "Yeah, you're right." I argued that Noah's Ark is basically the DNA, and it's talking about evolution, right? I mean, like when he puts all the animals into a ship, and we basically tells us like this is the only ship that's survived, and basically it's talking about the, how it came from the ocean. Like basically the Earth was mostly ocean, and life came from the oceans, right? And most of the Earth was only water, and our DNA came out of the water, and we're like, this is what it's saying, and I made that up, right? And we were like, yes, you're right.
It was all made up, I guess. So
no, but it and they loved it. It worked.
Sounds
it worked
good.
because
You're like the new prophet now.
No, but I was very proud of myself because I felt like I have discovered a miracle in the Quran, and my religion teachers were like, yeah.
Well, I also wanted to bring up, since you mentioned the water thing, in Surah 21 verse 30, it actually says that God created every living thing from water. Now that is actually partly true. Whether you're talking about them coming out of the water, as in from fish to amphibians to reptiles and so on, or you're talking about the body composition of males are about 70% water, females are about 60% water.
Should I say this verse in Arabic?
Please do, yes.
وخلقنا من الماء كل شيء حي. صدق الله العظيم.
Oh, really? Wow, man.
Yeah,
that's good.
That is, we made everything from water.
That's a different verse. It says that actually in two places, but that's you're right. So it's there's also that claim, and then there's clay. You know how I used to justify it? Actually, you know what? If it said that God made every living thing out of coal, there'd be some parallel, because at least it's carbon based. It's not silicon based, right? I mean,
maybe it's
clay
all bullshit.
Is silicon. But if we start incorporating microchips into ourselves and we become cyborgs in the future and we have silicon in us, I think it'd be like we're incorporating clay into us. Maybe people then will be like, hey, look, we are made out of.
No, but I think back at the time he didn't want to start a war on coal so he can get the Republican votes. That's the logic behind it.
Coal, yeah. All those coal people, you got something going on. By the way, all of this is. None of us believe this stuff. I just want to say we're just having fun with it. It's
the thing is that the all these stories, there's so many stories that it's hard for you not to have some hits and misses. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's how Nostradamus works. That's how Hafiz works. They all have predictions. They all have, because it's a book of so much. It's a book of so much random shit that eventually you like, if you want to come up with some miracles, that something you could associate something scientific with something in the book. In fact, if you can't find anything, I would assume that you have lack imagination. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it would be hard for you not to be able to match something scientific to some book of random bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Well, my favorite part is in numerology.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to this is like when they say the word life is mentioned. Something. If you multiply it by the word death and you divide it by the amount of the word halal chicken is mentioned, and then you will get the Big Bang Theory. And see, it all makes sense.
Actually,
halal chicken.
It's so
life,
obvious.
It's so obvious. How can you not miss that?
I spent so much time actually counting these because they were saying it.
It's amazing. It's actually it requires a lot of intelligence, by the way. It requires
you know what happened after the Big Bang was the big cigarette. Okay, so people don't smoke that much now.
But
yeah, I think the older generations. I know. It's just right afterwards.
Yeah, it's like there's all this, but actually, like this requires. I mean, this is where like when modern science comes in and then the religious are trying so hard to make sense of the book because the book is infallible, right? So because the book is infallible, all the modern science, if the modern science is right, they have to figure out a way to match these two things together. So either they deny it first. So like وَخَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ بِدُونَ أَعْمِدَةٍ, right? We created the skies without any like holders, because that's the Quran. So then they say, well, if you multiply the skies and you divide them by shawarma, you will get if you divide them by how many shawarma sandwiches you can make from a school, then you will get like the name of the stars, the number of the stars in each universe. Like this is how much mental gymnastics that they have to do, because like studying Islam for 12 years from elementary school to high school. So like in Iraq, what we do is that they give us the short verses, the short surahs at the beginning of the elementary school. And then when you go older, like when you become 18, you have to like start with Al-Baqarah and Al-Umran and all of the big ones. So like, they do mental gymnastics for 12 years with you. It's like, and like I actually had a very smart, well, one of them supported Al-Qaeda, but that was the other one was...
Yeah, it's like some of them do, you know.
Yeah,
always somebody.
The other one was
Some
like
of them are
so
good people.
smart that he was like trying so hard to play all this mental gymnastics with the numerology and stuff. And I really found it fascinating. I scored 100 in Islamic studies.
I think all of us
Wow.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's I actually really enjoyed it. When I have a whole, I described this in a lot of detail in my book. I really enjoyed twisting around all the words and, you know, making them mean anything I wanted to. It was almost like a challenge for me, because anything I wanted to do, I was tried to find a way that the Quran said it, and it almost never failed. I was always able to somehow justify everything I wanted to do by twisting, because it's so vague, it's so cryptic. Like there's some things that are just, I mean, cryptic. There's some stuff just like Alif Lam Mim. It doesn't mean anything, right?
Mhm.
Like it's just 3 letters, and like it's just a lunacy. So yeah,
So
I
as a
had a
me-
really good time with it back then.
As a medical practitioner, I have a question for you.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a hadith. There's a hadith that, and this is a Sahih hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari,
Which
volume
means that
4.
it's probably very authentic. That was one of
Yeah.
the big. Can we talk? We'll just quickly talk about what hadith are. These are the traditions of Muhammad, the things he said and did that his companions wrote down and recorded. And Sahih Bukhari is one of the most authentic and highly regarded ones, one of the biggest volumes. Anyway, go ahead.
Mhm. Narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said,
Oh, my cousin.
Yeah.
No, that's good. He's not my cousin.
Yeah.
The Prophet said, if a housefly falls in the drink of any one of you, he should dip it in the drink, for one of its wings has a disease, and the other has the cure for the disease. So, if a fly dips its wing into your drink, you have to really quickly push the other wing into your drink to get the antidote on the other wing. And of course, if he just dips his wing in and flies away, you have to go find him,
And then
figure out which fly it was,
Dip the whole thing in.
and put him back in your. So, as a medical practitioner, Ali,
Yeah.
can you tell us what is your opinion on this? Because I see online that this has been proven by science.
So what I did was
So-
I actually did pathologies, and that meant I used to do a lot of autopsies.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time they're on dead people, but in this case, whoever wrote it, I think that we should do it
Was
while he's
brain
still
dead?
alive. Yeah, no, I think that these people should be autopsied alive, just to see, you know, what's actually ticking.
Online, honestly, there's people that are going. They have got like evidence and proof as to why this is true.
Well, they have. You know, the flat eartherism is making a comeback.
Yes,
Shaq O'Neal.
Dysentery,
who by the way
dysentery
is
can be
Muslim.
solved if you just dip your fly into the drink.
But let's mention to everybody, this
Leprosy?
is what Yas just said is part of hadith that is
Yeah.
considered one of the most authentic hadiths in Islam, in Islamic
I was taught
teaching.
this as a kid.
Mhm.
I remember
So-
my mom telling me this.
Yeah.
So just understand that if anybody considered as hadith as authentic, that means that they have to believe that every fly has one wing that it causes you disease and another wing on the same fly that has a cure for the
On the same
disease.
fly. That's key.
The same
not
fly.
not another fly.
Not
Not
another
the
fly.
fly's twin.
You better find
has
that
a
same fly,
cure
man.
for the disease that is caused by the other wink. Just think about that.
Well, it makes sense.
Well, yeah, you have to. If you don't believe it, it's kufr. So you have to.
By the
believe
way, have you guys? I don't know if this is a universal thing, but so there is a hadith that I just remembered, which is it's from volume book 72, number 747. It looks like a United flight that hit the World Trade Center. Anyway, so narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle say, if you want to put on your shoes, put on the right shoe first, and if you want to take them off, take the left one first. Let the right shoe be the first to be put on and the last to be taken off. And then when you enter a house, you have to enter with your right foot, not the left foot. Is it because Allah is right wing? Is it that the reason?
Except for the bathroom.
Yeah, yes. The bathroom the left
is
foot
what?
Goes.
The bathroom is the opposite.
You have to.
Why is that?
Put your left foot in first.
That's right. You put your left foot in, you take your left foot out. And when you're leaving the bathroom, you leave right foot first.
But what is the logic behind this, actually? Do you guys remember?
There's no logic, Habibi. The whole thing
where's
is
the
bullshit.
logic behind it? Come on, what a question.
I was taught this as a kid. I remember, like, it doesn't matter how tired I was in the middle of the night getting up to go to the bathroom. I'd be like, okay, which foot is going in? Like a 5-year-old. Like, I still didn't even know right from left. And I'd be like so panicked that I'd go in with the wrong foot because then I'd get possessed by the devil, because the devil lives in the bathroom.
The moment you ask why, you're missing the point.
Yeah, right? You're not allowed to ask
you
why.
Don't question God.
The bathroom thing. I just want to continue it. So I was taught that the shaitan, the devil, lives in the bathroom, but I was also taught that the shaitan can't enter a mosque. So then I was like, well, what about the bathrooms in the mosque?
That's a good... See, this is the thing. Like, you were a genius.
Yeah, and then I got in trouble.
Yeah.
For asking, what about the bathroom in the mosque?
Yeah. Why are you asking so many questions? Because the shaitan is in you, that's why. Shaitan's in you, waswasa in your ear, like whispering in your ear, making you ask all these questions.
That's actually reminds me, because we had a story...
That I think is true.
We had a story about Imam Ali, where he actually took an arrow in the knee. This is actually true. Okay, he took an arrow to the knee, and
why is that funny?
I don't know why it's funny.
No, but you guys don't know.
I'm just imagining Imam Ali walking around with a fucking
arrow. You guys don't know why this is funny, but a lot of people know.
All
right,
go ahead.
Anyway, so he took an arrow to the knee, and they wanted to pull it out, but every time he wanted to pull it out, he was screaming pain, and they wouldn't let him about the arrow. He would
had a fucking arrow in his knee. If you had an arrow in your knee, we're not talking about like your mouse button. We're talking about like an actual arrow with the thing. Okay, go ahead, Armin.
All right,
because pull out can mean different things to different people.
Yeah,
they went to Muhammad and asked him. Oh my God.
Armin, please, guys, let him finish.
Sorry, Armin.
Yeah. They went to Muhammad and asked him, how do we pull out this arrow, right? All right. Oh, God, you guys are
No, guys. Sorry.
No, keep going.
Right.
That's what she said.
Yes, is drunk.
Sorry. Please keep going.
Anyways, Muhammad said, let him start praying. When he's praying, his mind is so focused on God that he's not going to notice. So they waited. When Ali was praying, they pulled the arrow out, and he didn't notice anything. There was a second story about Imam Ali that he went to mosque and he was praying, and this guy comes in, and this is when Ali was the Khalifa already. He was the fourth Khalifa, but this poor guy comes, asks everybody for money, and nobody gives him anything. And then Ali, when he was praying, he just takes out his Khalifa ring and he just gives it to the poor man. Right. And they were like, oh, my gosh, Ali was so nice because he noticed that nobody is paying attention to this guy. He took out the Khalifa, like the most important thing he had on him, and he gave it to the poor guy. And I was like, wait a minute. How come he noticed the poor guy coming in and nobody giving him money when he was praying, when he couldn't even notice the arrow being pulled out of his knee when he was praying? And the answer was, get out of the class.
Yeah. That's right. Love it.
They kicked the guy, kicked me out of a class. Yeah, you're too smart.
Yeah. One of the problems with the Hadith, of course, especially with like liberal and Muslims who live in the West, is that there are many that are considered to be inauthentic. and there are thousands of them literally, and it's a gold mine of just hilarity.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's
and
cheating, honestly. If you use hadith, there's so much bullshit there.
there's so much
Mhm.
there that it's
It's
just,
like
you can't. It's like taking because those things were actually compiled by men. It's a little bit like the New Testament in a way, or the Talmud. It's like that,
Mhm.
because it's not really the actual holy scripture. It's like the appendix or the supplement to it.
Do you have
But
something from the Quran that you brought?
Yeah, well, I
I
have this one. It's narrated by some funny name. So it's a volume 7, book 71, number 619,
so this is one more hadith.
narrated by Nazi. That's cool.
Nazi, yeah.
Nazi. That's not the Third Reich. So Abdullah bin Umair said, the Prophet said, fever is from the heat of hell. So put it out, cool it with water. Nafi said, Abdullah used to say, oh Allah, relieve us from punishment when he suffered from fever. So I think he thought that fever is somehow related to hell. Like it's kind of a punishment.
Well, they're both very hot.
Here's the counter. Here's how it would defend it, right? Because there's another hadith that Muhammad says the devil hides under your nails, right?
Yeah,
So,
under your fingernails. That's right.
under your fingernails. So people would like,
I
look,
didn't
this
even
is
know that.
actually very,
Yeah.
this is very good because God knew about bacteria, and to the common people, it was just telling you to just clean your nails. And God also knows that you need to cool down fever, but to convince people, you have to tell them that this is the heat of hell. That's why you cool it down. So you're basically making people, teaching them scientific things by putting the words in layman's terms. So
I have another interpretation of that a little gymnastic thing that I can do. That is relevant to modern science and forensic science, actually, is that a lot of times with criminals, like people who've been assaulted or attacked, what they do is they look for the DNA of the assaulter under the fingernails, because often people, when they try to defend themselves, they scratch the skin. So you look for the DNA of the criminal under the fingernails, and that's how they identify rapists, attackers, thieves, people like that, people who mug you. So
See? Mashallah, it was all in
Mashallah.
Islam knows
is that
everything,
good?
right?
Is that good? See,
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
is
yeah.
that's legitimate.
Wait,
Look at that.
that's not good at all. Are you saying God is teaching you how to avoid
No. I'm saying
persecution?
the devil is under your nails. The devil who attacked you and he did terrible things to you.
The
His
attacker.
DNA is under your nail. Of course.
No,
Nobody knew
because
what
the
DNA was.
hadith is telling you to clean your nails. Basically, if we're going by your justification, you're saying God is trying to tell rapists after you rape your somebody to hide the evidence.
Okay, well, that part of the hadith is inauthentic. Okay?
Kick him out of the
first part of it.
classroom,
Yeah,
Ali.
speaking of Satan,
What are you doing? Like, get out of the class, Armin. Your teacher was right.
speaking of Satan,
Stop finding
check this
holes
one
in
out.
my arguments about.
Check this one out. The Prophet
Okay,
said,
wait.
that is
So
Abu
can we,
Hurairah.
Faisal, before we go on, can we intersperse? Because the thing is with the hadith, a lot of the audience is listening to this. They'll just be like, well, the hadith, we kind of disregard them, but the Quran is the real
Nobody
thing.
disregards the hadith.
No, listen, in your circles where you were raised, nobody does, but in my circles, every Muslim I talk to, when I said there's
They're
this
Your
Quranists?
circle is not true. Your circle of Muslims is the Western hippie Muslims.
really, but most of the Western Muslims are the moderates and all that stuff, and they tend to think they're like, well, it's not in the Quran.
So they
The
don't
Quran is
pray?
God's word. Huh? Well, nobody's saying that's logical, but every time you tell them that did you know it said this in a hadith? They're like, well, the hadith were written by men. We don't know if they're authentic or not.
But
Right,
then if they don't know, then how do we know when to pray? How do we know that we're supposed to go to Hajj?
They don't
How do we
think
know
that far.
about
the-
it? Okay.
Yeah,
They
they don't go
don't
to
think that
Hajj
far.
either. They don't
But
go.
what they do, this is generally, Faisal, you know this, every
Yeah.
time I talk to somebody, when I quote the Quran, then they have to argue it because that's something they all agree on. Like
Okay,
every
what
time
do you
I
got from
mention,
the Quran? We got some crazy shit there
Uh,
too. Beating up your wife is in the Quran, and
Yeah,
men
so
are
this is-
responsible
you
for
wanna
women
start
in
with
the
that?
Not the
Quran.
funny part.
I have some good stuff from.
do you want to start with, I think, one of the most popular and discussed verses right now? So let's talk about 434. You want to do that and get it out of the way, and then we can go to the fun stuff?
The beating of women?
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh, I know this verse.
Yeah. Faisal memorized. The first thing he memorized when he was younger.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, this one I'm going to.
And men are responsible for women. That's how
So
it
let's read out,
starts first.
Faisal,
They're the
read out the whole
guardians.
verse in Arabic.
Like
and
the
I
little
will,
pet. You got to take care of your pet.
Yeah,
Hold
I'll
on, so
read
it's
out the English.
It's
It's 434.
334, right?
434.
Oh, it's 434.
Surah An-Nisa.
Which zip code is this?
Hell.
Ar-Rajadu. Okay, go on.
Hold on, let me, 434. Surah An-Nisa. I just Googled it. 1 second.
Mhm.
Quran.com. I like that we're using Quran.com as a source for our podcast.
Well, it's actually really good, Quran.com. Like people don't.
Yeah,
It's
so
better than most of the traditional.
you want me to
but
say
go
it?
ahead. Yeah, you
Mm.
read it out in Arabic, and I'll read out the
I
translation.
thought this was supposed to be funny stuff, but okay. go
Yeah,
ahead.
Oh, this
Bismillah.
could get funny.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات فنتت حفظت للغيب بما حفظ الله
Salihatu. Yeah, go ahead.
والتي تخافون نشوزهن فعضوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا. صدق الله العظيم.
Right.
You
so,
don't really have to say Sadaqallah.
Yeah,
you don't,
yeah,
you don't,
we don't
you,
have
you
to.
really don't have to be that authentic.
Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do.
the translation of this verse 434 is as follows. This is from Sahih International, but this is pretty much a consensus. Men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other and what they spend for maintenance from their wealth. So righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in the husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, not the wives who are arrogant, but the wives from whom you even fear arrogance, first advise them, then if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them. But if they obey you once more, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand. Sadaqallah.
I just want to say that there is also a hadith about hanging your whip in plain sight so that your children and your wife can see it, so that they can be reminded to always listen to you. There's a so that's the hadith that sort of partners up with this ayah from the Quran.
Yeah. So this is a thing that basically what they're saying is that if you fear disobedience from your wife, then you kind of talk to them, and if they don't listen, then you send them to a separate bed. You stop sleeping with them, and then
Shucks.
yeah, I know, it'll be terrible suffering. And then finally, you can beat them. And some people say you're supposed to beat them lightly.
Wait,
other
you
people
can
say-
beat them or you have to beat them?
Well, it
it's
says, and finally beat them.
yeah, it's not a recommendation. It's a command.
It's a command. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
no beat them. So the controversy here is with the words, the Arabic words that correspond to
Yeah.
beat
So
them.
I mean, there's two ways that usually people use to defend this. One of them is that this isn't even hitting. The zaraba word here is coming to go towards them, right? And another, this is very recent defense. It didn't used to exist in Arabic scholars didn't use this defense before. But the more common traditional defense is that there's a hadith where they ask Muhammad how they should hit him, and he was brushing his teeth, I think, that at the moment, and he just shows them his toothbrush with this. So he was saying like with something with something so light, like as light as a toothbrush. So don't hit them hard, hit them with something very light. So those are the
like
two main
foreplay.
defense.
Yeah. It's like you take a feather and you're like, oh, I'm gonna hit you with my feather and my toothbrush. It's foreplay.
Like then
and
he
you should be like,
deserves to be punched.
it's like,
really.
oh, please, yeah, hit me again with that toothbrush. I like it. A little bit to the left.
So how do you respond?
You know? How do you call it?
Reminded me of Monica Lewinsky and her cigar.
So how do you respond to those two defenses?
Well, the first one was what? That
The zaraba is not strike, is going to.
That word is still commonly used today. It's not like it's some old Arabic classic unused word.
yeah. So zaraba, which you're saying it in Persian, but in Arabic it's daraba, right?
Zaraba.
Daraba, right?
Yeah, in Persian we only have one Z, unlike in Arabic there's like 4 different fucking kinds of Zs. Right?
Well,
Exactly,
you
so-
stole our language. Don't try to like. Don't complain.
So,
Yeah.
the daraba is the root word from which, the words that Faisal said, he said, wadrubuhunna. Adribuhunna, adribu is derived from the word daraba, which actually means beat. But some of these modern sort of hippie scholars, all of them who happen somehow to be South Asian, they don't really happen to be. I haven't really seen a lot of Arabic scholars use this justification, but these South Asian scholars who've learned Arabic as a second language, or Iranian scholars sometimes, they say that this word does not just mean beat, because there's other verses.
Just beat it. Just beat it.
So there's other verses like where the word wadurabat means to be humiliated. In some places it says to go forth, right? That the root word for daraba is used to say go forth or go ahead or to move forward or to move towards something. And the answer to this is that daraba is a verb. That means to hit, okay? It's defined according to the object. So I'll give you an example in English. Right now, again, I wrote about this in my book. Supposing I said, hit the road. What does it mean to hit the road?
It means go to the road.
It means hit the road. Let's start driving. Let's start moving, all right? Or hit the lights, or hit the goal, hit the bottle. Now, if I say all this stuff, if I say hit the road means to start traveling on the road, then hit the woman must also mean travel. Does that make any sense?
No.
Of course it doesn't. Because the verb daraba is defined by the object that it's referring to. So when it's saying hit the road, the word hit means something very different. When you say hit the woman, the word hit means something very different. In this case, wadribuhunna actually means hit the woman. If it said wadribu or adribu anhunna, that would mean to strike a parting or whatever those things are, to strike a separation.
And this is pretty clear. Like anybody who speaks Arabic, this is pretty obvious. Like
it
this
is
not
obvious. Like there's absolutely no basis to the justification that the word means anything else except for beat women. That is what there's no controversy about this among people familiar with the Arabic language.
That's true.
Right. So that's the first part.
What Ali said is completely true. أضربوهن, and that's why it's plural. So أضربوهن as because it's Surah An-Nisa. So it's the plural of, because Nisa is the plural of woman. So أضربوهن means hit the woman.
Women the whole time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even if you take the word strike in English, if I say, Faisal, you and I are going to strike up a conversation, that means we're going to start talking, right? I'm sorry, that's my baby crying. Can you still hear me over her?
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't strike her. So the strike up a conversation means I'm starting a conversation with you. So if strike up a conversation means I'm starting up a conversation, does striking a woman mean that I'm starting up a conversation with a woman? No, it doesn't. No. It means I'm hitting a woman. So
it's like Counter-Strike. You know the game Counter-Strike?
No, I don't know.
All right, but also to the point that this is supposed to be a light striking and it's not supposed to be hard. I just wanted to respond to that because first of all, even if it's light striking, that's still pretty fucking deplorable. Like that's you're still hitting a woman. Second of all, the Quran never clarified that it's supposed to be light striking. This is something that if God was giving instructions to people and if he wanted to make sure that it's light striking, he did a very shitty job at communicating it to people.
He didn't say light striking. He just said strike her. And it's up to you how hard you want to strike her.
Yeah. So
exactly. But what I was going to say, that there is this.
We're not justifying the other thing.
Feminist Islam people, will say that it's just like family disputes, and this is how it's kind of like the man should be the one keeping the family and I don't know, something
bullshit.
It's just like when you spank your kid, it doesn't mean you hate your kid. It means you want them to behave better. So if the woman is behaving well, then that is actually what
this is problematic.
Do you guys know Karen Strawn? I came across this woman. She's a female men's rights activist. I don't know, but anyway, yep, she is. Yeah, she has all these YouTube videos, and one of them, she actually talks about how she justifies beating the wife. why wife beating is okay, and she talks about some neighbors who are upstairs, and the wife is screaming and yelling, and then eventually he'd hit her, and everything would be fine. And she actually said that that's something that she needed as well. She actually, Dave Rubin interviewed her. It's fascinating. You guys should listen to
I've
it.
heard about this.
Karen Strauss.
All right, let's go to something a little bit more less.
Yeah, it's moving right along. We're not justifying everything that we're reading today because it will be here for a while. Let's just share all the crazy shit we have. Ali, you said you had something from the Quran, but you never told us what it is.
Oh, that was from the Quran. I actually have something. One of my that was one of the, I guess Faisal had. That was the one. I also have a bunch of other stuff. I actually have something from the Old Testament that I want to share that I think is really, really
Faisal, did you have something from the Quran before we move religions?
One of the major scientific inaccuracies, because that's one of the things is that in the Quran it says that there are 7 skies, right? There are 7 skies.
7 heavens.
7 heavens. And my favorite one is when Muhammad flew to Jerusalem, right? And then he went, and then he took Uber
on a flying donkey, right?
On a flying donkey. No, flying horse. Flying horse.
Neither horse.
Wasn't he a mule or something?
No.
Was it a horse?
It's nothing that we know because its face, it had a human face.
Have you ever seen it? What is the name? It's a
Buraq.
Al-Buraq.
Buraq.
Yeah,
that's right.
So then he first of all he took Uber Pool to Jerusalem, right? And then he took Uber X to heaven. So the whole story.
Uber.
Uber.
He took Uber.
I'm
Bull.
Sorry, Faisal.
No, it's fine.
You're cute. I love your accent.
So yeah, Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. I mean, this is considered it's literally so funny. I mean, it is funny to begin with. First of all, he took a flying horse and first of all, I mean, why didn't he just go to heaven from Mecca? Why did he take Uber Pool? The thing is that he needed an Uber Pool. I mean, if you just think about it from just a financial perspective, right? if you have $30 on your PayPal, why do you use Uber Pool to go to Jerusalem and then take an Uber X to heaven? If you can go to heaven if you can take the highway from Mecca, then why just don't take the FDR drive? Take the FDR drive and go all the way up. And this is actually
we're moving away from the Quran right now, but anyway, go on.
Well, this is a bigger reformer here, okay? So I'm trying to bring the. So
Obey says it was a flying centaur.
This is a reform version of the flying horse story.
Yeah. So what? So
it was.
This is believed to be literally true by actually. I've met people who literally believe that this thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't even think of it. They don't even think of it as metaphorical. They think that literally Muhammad took a flying horse or whatever, Al-Buraq, whatever you want to call it, right? And then he took to heaven, and then he met Allah, right? He met Allah over there. But Allah never showed his face. So Allah was going anonymous. He was using a U proxy, right? He was using a VPN. So Allah was using a VPN over. So he was using a VPN, and he refused to talk to Muhammad. So he used a third party, right? So he used a Jabril, and yes.
This is when they argued about how many prayers every day.
Yes.
First he's like, you have to pray to me 50 times a day.
It started with 50, and then it went back, and it was between Moses. Moses was also negotiating.
That's right. I remember Moses being there.
Yeah.
He's like, Moses, 50, and Muhammad's like, I can't do that.
Moses is like, go
50.
Back.
Moses was played by Ben
Affleck.
Moses was played by Ben Affleck, and Jesus was played by.
Well, let's tell people what happened. So God told Muhammad that go back to people and tell them that they have to pray 50 times a day. And then he came back from heaven, and Moses was like, how many times did he tell you that you have to pray? He says 50. You're like, are you fucking kidding me? Nobody's going to pray 50 times a day. go back and renegotiate for less. And he went to God, and then he went back to God, and then God said,
he's in the market, he's in the souk.
God was like, fine, like 40. And then he came to Moses. Moses like, are you
Fine.
serious? You 40?
Oh, I'd heard multiples of 5. Like I thought it was 50 to 45.
I don't know.
40.
I don't know what it was. I just know it kept on going back between Moses and God, Muhammad. And then when it came to 5, Moses was like, I'm pretty sure people are not even going to do 5. Muhammad was like, I'm not going to
done,
go
man.
Muhammad was like, I'm fucking done with this. There's no way I'm going back.
5
Moses
is it.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the Iran deal. I was like, first of all, let's negotiate. First of all, let's negotiate on centrifuges and then the human rights. And then they're like, what the fuck is human rights? It's all discuss centrifuges for 10 years. And that's like pretty much what seems like the deal. It's a lot like the Iran deal.
Well, it's a lot like Donald Trump. You always start from the most extreme position, then you negotiate down, right?
This is authentic stuff, though. Like when we believe these things as completely Islamic, this is not something that is a fringe teaching, right? This is, By the way, when Muhammad went to heaven, he also mentioned that he really wanted to make this clear, that when he saw Abraham, he looked like Muhammad. And for him, that point was very important because that was the point. That was still around the time that he was trying to make it clear that Islam is is the Jewish religion that is continuing, right?
Yeah.
So he was really marketing Islam to Jewish people at that time, and that's why
Moses was there.
Yeah, eventually he changed his mind, and this whole becoming the Messiah that the Jews were waiting for, but. That's the reason why Moses was an important part of the story and Abraham was a big part of the story, and that's why he also said, and also because Jews said like you're not the prophet we're waiting for because we're waiting for a Jew, not an Arab, and that's why it was important. I think it was important for him to mention that he looked like Abraham.
Yeah, and then he told the Jews to go back to their country, and then the Jews were like, "You're so racist." I mean, that's.
But okay, so now that we're talking about, I just want to go back, take a trip to the Old Testament, and I want to read you guys out something that shows, like, this whole thing about how Muhammad wanted to show it was a continuation of Judaism. So I just wanted to read. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 20, and the verses or the passages from 10 to 20. So it says, "When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace." This is from the Bible, the Old Testament, Jewish scripture. "If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, the livestock, and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves." That's pretty much what ISIS is doing right now.
That's Islam, yeah.
Yeah. "And you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat all the cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby." It basically says that you have to kill everybody. Right. Oh, and sorry, the last line of this. "However, in the cities of the nations the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave alive anything that breathes." So It's amazing that what ISIS does and how Islam was spread in Muhammad's time, all of this, this is how kind of Moses did his own thing too, according to the Old Testament. So there are a lot of parallels, interesting ones between Judaism and Islam.
I wish they do that in interfaith events. Have you guys been to interfaith events?
Yeah, they should read this verse.
Yeah.
So we have a lot in common.
Whenever there's an interfaith event, it's like, wow, our religion talks about peace. Oh, it does? Ours too. It's all bullshit. That is all fake news. It's all fake news. Like all I wanted to do is like, you are fake news. But the thing is, like, they never talk about what's actually in common. It's like, they are not religions of peace. I would argue that violence is a central message of all these religions, at least to a period of time, including Christianity. I mean, Jesus said, "I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring sword." So he was not a hippie from Williamsburg. He was not.
Well, you know the moderate defense, though. You know how you have
Armin's trying to share something, I
it's
think.
okay.
Oh, sorry, Armin.
No.
Do you
No,
want to go
you
ahead?
guys are going off on a tangent now.
No, I wanted to bring the point that you know how this is actually very parallel to what we talked about the hadith, because what you brought is from the Old Testament, and a lot of Christians always say you can ignore the Old Testament because it doesn't apply anymore. But both the Muslims and the Christians, I know, but both the Muslims and the Christian have run to this problem, because when it comes to Muslims, you have the 5 pillars of Islam, which 4 of them come from the hadith. And we have with Christians, you have the 10 Commandments, which would come from the Old Testament. So from one side, they're arguing that you can get rid of it because now you have the New Testament, but on the other side, you have the pillars of the religion being established in the books that they're trying to.
So I'm actually prepared for this this argument, and I prepared for it before the podcast because I knew that we'd talk about this at some point. This is, you know, how the Muslim excuse is this is taken out of context, it doesn't apply anymore, but the Christian excuse for the New Testament is like, well, the Old Testament, the moderate Christians say the Old Testament doesn't apply, that's obsolete. That's actually not true.
Jesus.
So Jesus
I have a
himself,
question. I have a question.
Right?
Wait, Jesus. Let's
so there's a lot of places in the New Testament where increasingly Jesus says that the scripture cannot be broken. That's in John 10:35. He just refers to it as the commandment of God. He refers to the Old Testament as literally God's word. That's in Matthew 15:3. He calls it the word of God in Mark 7:13. And then he also said, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass away from the law until all is accomplished, referring to the Old Testament. And that's Matthew 5:18. That's the most famous one. And there are many others. So
and
Jesus
himself shared Matthew 5:17. So the one right before that, where it says, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill.
Yeah, that's bad grammar. I am not come to destroy. It's like this guy is like an immigrant, Middle Eastern immigrant.
And also, actually, now that you're let me finish this thought. Now that you're mentioning scripture in the New Testament that supports the Old Testament, there's also scripture in the Quran that supports the Hadith, because the Quran specifically mentions that you have to follow the way of Muhammad. Muhammad is the role model. Muhammad is the person. So the thing is that if the Quran itself is telling you that whatever Muhammad says and whatever Muhammad does is the way to live, then the Quran itself is telling you that you have to be able to use hadith, because go on.
But I'm going to be in defense of that, because what is considered authentic hadith and authentic hadith is disputed. So Shias are not supposed to follow Bukhari, because the theory is because the theory is that Bukhari only lived.
Well, that's why you get killed then, hey?
Yeah, is that Bukhari was able to gather like tens of thousands of hadiths, and he only lived with Muhammad for a very short period of time, or maybe he did not even live with Muhammad. Bukhari came in after Muhammad, so they will always say that we take hadith coming from people living surrounded by Muhammad, like they take the Imam Ali quotes about Muhammad, but they say that Bukhari and Sahih Muslim are not like the most. But actually, I have a question. Yeah, I have a question.
There's actually another aspect to that, Faisal. There was a time. Well, there's two things. I mean, at the time of Abu Bakr, there were some people who were enemies of Islam, apparently, who circulated a lot of fake hadiths there. So the caliphs at one point, they did. So what they did, they actually did a hadith purge, where they got rid of many of these. So many people say that some of those survived. The second thing is that what the Shia believe is, because they go with the Ahl al-Bayt, which is a family of the Prophet. Yeah. They think that Ali and his family members, obviously, my brother knows me a lot better than some dude who came 20 years after I died, or however many years after I died. So they go with first degree relatives in their writings as a source of hadith. And I think that the main difference, if you want to sum it up, between Shia and Sunni, apart from successorship, is really the source of a hadith, like where they get their hadith from. To be fair to
the Shias, Muhammad at the very last Hajj said to everybody on the way back that I leave two things for you. One is the Quran and the religion, and the other one is the Ahlul Bayt. So the Shias understood that there's two sources of understanding Islam: the Quran and Ahlul Bayt. And they think the Sunnis only got one of them. We Shias got both.
Well, I mean, but that is the Shia story, right? I mean, the Shia story is there is the Ghadir, Lilat al-Ghadir, right? In which Muhammad said, whoever follows me will follow Ali. Ali is my successor. And that's what the theory says, is that Ali, that was supposedly an appointment by Muhammad to Ali to be the first caliph. But the Sunnis say, no, this is like Breitbart source. This is not real.
That's fake news.
No, actually,
that's an alternate fact.
No, that's not true. Wrong.
Anyway, it doesn't matter, you guys. We're going deep into the weeds. It doesn't matter. It's all bullshit.
They believe that the Sunnis agree with that happened. It's the translation that I think he said Mola or something. They just think that doesn't mean successor. That just means like a friend or something. Like whoever is a friend of mine is a friend of Ali.
No, he said something about successor. I mean, that is.
I know. I'm just saying that the Shias are just interpreting, like the interpretation of what Muhammad said is different, but nobody is denying what Muhammad's, like both Shias and Sunnis agree with that he said that at that time. You know what I mean? But it's just what okay, anyways, the interpretation of what Muhammad said is different, but nobody disputes.
I have a question, but just and kind of like, because this is universal. Who set up the 5 pillars of Islam?
Oh, that's a good question.
I have no idea.
Because I mean, they're universal. The 5 pillars of Islam, for those who don't know them, prayers and zakat and Ramadan and Hajj, right?
Hajj and zakat.
And zakat, yeah.
Charity, yeah.
So, but I don't know. This actually is a universal thing between both Sunnis and Shias. The 5 pillars of Islam is something that is followed by both. But I still don't know who like set them on stone. Yeah. So
what are our patrons saying? Our patrons are talking. Wendell is saying 10 commandments were from the Old Testament, but hippie Jesus summarizes it into 2 commandments in the New Testament. Jesus is the OG Twitter user. So I guess that was.
Well, you know who summarized it into 2 commandments is George Carlin.
Okay.
You guys should go in on YouTube. George Carlin has this segment.
That's right. He's like, you can rape. That's no problem. But no, wait, that's Louis
No, he
CK.
said that, yeah, but what he did was,
don't say his name
thou shalt not rape is actually not one of the 10 commandments. You you can't say the name of the Lord in vain, but
you can't say his name with a shitty attitude.
Yeah, there's nothing about raping, but what he does is he actually takes all of the 10 commandments and he distills them down. He looks at how much repetition there is in the basic concepts and distills them down to just 2. And it's a great routine.
Faisal, to answer your question, the 5 pillars of Islam come from the Jibril hadith, the hadith of Gabriel.
The hadith of Gabriel?
Yeah, that's where so it's actually one of the most authentic hadiths.
So it's from Gabriel himself.
Yeah, I mean,
just like the Quran.
This is the first time I hear something called hadith from Gabriel. I thought that the Quran is because Gabriel is the third party.
I've heard of him too.
Yeah, this is the guy I think named Gabriel, not the Gabriel.
I
don't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure anything from Gabriel would be considered the Quran.
Quran, yeah.
Yeah, because
it's Peter Gabriel.
But let me just.
Peter Tatchell is the
sledgehammer. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I clarify why I was talking about nursing, Faisal.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
There is a fatwa that was in Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where there was a
actually, guys, can I
guy
correct
from
something?
Al-Azhar University. Okay,
we said something wrong. We need to correct it before we go. So Muslim scholars named the hadith of Gabriel because it's a narration from companion Sahaba, not Sahaba, not from Muhammad, but from Gabriel. It's also one of those unique hadiths where Archangel Gabriel assumed human. Human form of manifested himself before. Oh my God, this is actually pretty cool. I have to read this.
It's actually from that's what I was saying. That's what I'd heard of, is that there are some hadith that are actually from the Archangel Gabriel.
Well, now
holy crap.
Yeah, but
it complicates things.
I want to know about this I want to hear more about this whole nursing thing.
Yeah.
Explain.
So it's the breastfeeding fatwa. So one of Sunni Islam's most prestigious institutions, that's Al-Azhar University in Egypt, a cleric from there issued a decree allowing women to breastfeed their male colleagues. And the reason why she should breastfeed her male colleagues is to avoid sexual deviancy.
That's not how it works.
No, but that's true. But you know what happened is that in Riyadh, when I remember reading this.
I should probably explain the rest of like what's happening.
Yeah.
But...
Go on.
So because in Islam, if a woman nurses two children, those children are siblings. So if she nurses a boy and a girl, then that girl and boy can never get married because now they're and she doesn't have to wear her hijab in front of that boy. Like they're basically like family.
Yeah.
So he took that to mean a grown woman can nurse her grown male colleagues, can suckle on her breast. So that way they can become like
they can work together.
Muhram. That way they can work together, and then there won't be any sexual deviance.
Yeah, no. So the first time I learned about this is when I was
directly from her breast, by the way. So she can't like express it into a bottle because that's a no-go.
They didn't have breast pumps back then.
No, it has to be at least 5 times.
Right, and so what I was saying was when I was growing up in Riyadh and I was a kid, and every Friday they used to have I don't know if it was Friday or whatever, they used to have a thing where people would write to Arab News, their main newspaper, and they would ask some religious scholar all these questions like, can I do this? Can I piss?
It's my favorite. This is one of my favorites.
I wonder if anybody ever did this. I wonder if there's any woman that ever nursed her coworkers.
No, but I got it. So what happened is one dude wrote in and he actually had the question, and I read it as a kid, and it said, what if a man is sucking his wife's breast and swallows a few drops of her milk?
That's it.
This is an Arab news.
Now.
And the guy wrote back, he's like, essentially he becomes her son because of the wet nursing thing. So he is now their nikah, which is their marriage, their entire marriage becomes annulled. And I don't know, they had to go through some procedure to be able to become husband and wife again from becoming potentially mother and son. So
what procedure?
Right. So I have no idea. I don't know what the process was. I can't remember. I was just so shocked as a 9-year-old kid.
Just reading this procedure.
I couldn't get past it. I was like, okay, listen, I don't even want to know how this gets fixed. That's
actually a good prank to play on your dad. Like just put it in his drinking coffee in the morning.
And then be like, ha.
You're not my dad anymore.
Your mom's son now.
No, you're not my dad anymore. You're my brother.
That's right.
Yeah. But speaking of these interesting family relationships, I thought one of the other things I really like in the Quran, one of the fun ones, is the story of Lot and his daughters, right? And I thought this is in the spirit of interfaith, the whole interfaith spirit. I thought we'd also connect this to what it says in the other scriptures. So the verse is Surah 11, verse 78. That's 1178. It says about Lot, who was a prophet, Lut in Arabic. And his people came hastening to him. Before this, they had been doing evil deeds. He said, so this is basically a bunch of gay people.
Evil deeds, Haile?
Okay, so let's get into this. So there was a whole town that Lot lived in that was full of gay people. They all started having sex with each other. There were all these men, homosexual men, were all having sex with each other. And these handsome men showed up at Lot's place. They were his guests. And they were actually angels disguised as very handsome men. And obviously all these gay men just came in. They started rapping on his door. He's like, let us in. We want those. They wanted to rape the angels.
We want in on the orgy. We're here for the gangbang.
They wanted the 2 handsome men that were Lot's house guests. So what Lot did was he went out. He told the people, this is what it says in the thing. His people came hastening to him. Before this, they had been doing evil deeds, and those evil deeds were obviously, the dig in the desert. And he goes, he said, "Oh, my people, these are my daughters. They are purer for you. So fear Allah and do not disgrace me concerning my guests." So what he was saying was, don't embarrass me in front of my guests by taking them and raping them. Take my daughters instead. So he pretty much offered his daughters to all of these people. To take them just so that they wouldn't have sex with his male guests.
Here's the defense.
Tell
he knew they were gay, so they were not interested in his daughters. All right. So
Come on. Yeah, I know.
I don't know.
He's like, well, they're not going to do it. So he's like, his daughters were the experiment. He's like, hey, kids, listen, just go out there. They won't do anything to you. Don't worry. Let's just see how this turns out. Now, the fun thing, and I'm almost done with this, and there is.
But most girls have a gay best friend, so he might probably wanted to do that for them.
Yeah, of course he did. Right. So now
to go shopping.
This story also appears in the Old Testament, of course, right, where Lot offers the angel rapers, who are at his door. He offers his daughters to them. But there is a more interesting story about Lot and his daughters in the Old Testament. And this is, I think, my favorite verse in the Bible, Old, New, maybe even in all of Abrahamic scripture of all time. Not a whole lot, but it's a fun story. You guys are going to love it. Genesis 19, verses 30 to 38, Lot and his daughters. Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. One day, the oldest daughter said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth. Let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with him and preserve our family line through our father." You guys are familiar with this, right?
Yeah.
That night, they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. I know, I'm pretty sure he did. The next day, the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and sleep with him so we can preserve our family line through our father." So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went in and slept with him. Again, he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites of today. So that's where they came from.
All right,
Products
I'm
of
going to
incest.
defend the daughters and be like, if you have a father that is that is offering you for rape, then it's okay to rape your father.
Back. An eye for an eye and a rape for a rape. That's basically what they did. They date raped him, their own dad. So I just wanted to say that, homosexuality is unnatural according to Christian fundamentalists. And, incest with your dad to preserve your genetic.
I have no problem with incest but this was not consensual. They made him drunk and stuff. So this was like
Can
rape.
you not? Like, that's going to be a quote now. Armin said he has no problem with incest.
No, adults having sex.
Speaking of Lot, I don't want to change the subject, but the word for homosexual in Arabic is luti. So when they say someone is homosexual, within the religious circles, they say either shadh, which means deviant, or luti, which is
Egyptians
coming from.
Don't say either of those things.
And that's derived from Lot.
From
Egyptians
Lot, yeah.
don't.
All right, but let's summarize the story. But because if you look at the whole story together, it's pretty interesting. Because Lot actually in the Bible, a few chapters later, Lot is mentioned as a really good man, right? Even though he offered his daughters for rape to a whole gang.
Well, that's why he was a good man according to the Bible.
So Lot never got punished. In fact, he was mentioned as a very good man. The daughters never got punished, even though they raped their own father. But look at the people that were punished were people in the city that were having gay consensual sex. They got burned. And the mom, the poor freaking mom, for what? For looking back. For looking back at the city, she turned into a pillar of salt. So raping your father, no punishment. Offering your daughter for rape, no punishment. Looking back at a city, pillar of salt.
Pillar of salt.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have something from Genesis 2.
But salt and kebabs make up.
Related.
Kebabs without salt is not tasty.
It is not tasty. You're right. The seasoning is very important. Yeah, that's where Lot's wife comes in. She's responsible for all the seasoning.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and
so go ahead.
With olive oil.
This is from the
extra
Genesis
virgin olive oil, or
extra virgin.
Yeah. So go ahead. The Genesis 6:4.
There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So basically, these giants were having sex with human women and quite possibly tearing them apart. And that's Genesis 6:4. So this was new to me. I
Wow.
actually didn't know this.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
well, there you go.
That's messed up.
I know. There's there is a lot of there are a lot of parallels, and there's a lot of plagiarism. I think what the Quran does,
Nephilim.
unfortunately, is it takes the worst of both and it puts them together. So, in the Old Testament, you had all these horrible corporal punishments. Like a rape victim has to marry her rapist, or the woman who is not found to be a bride has to be stoned to death at her father's doorstep. That's all in Deuteronomy and so on. And then the New Testament brings in proselytization, that you take all this stuff and you have to go and spread it to people on top of that. And then it also brings in martyrdom, like Jesus died for your sins, the sacrifice of death. And what Islam does in a way is it combines all of the horrible stuff and the violence and in the Old Testament, and it combines it, also brings in the proselytization and the spread of it, and also brings in the concept of martyrdom and life after death, and being saved by doing the right thing. And it's just a really, really toxic mix of everything. So and the idea that the New Testament isn't violent is also ridiculous, because in the New Testament, the kind of violence that's promised if you don't submit to Jesus, remember submission, which is also what Islam means. If you don't submit, then is you have an eternal torture and violence beyond anything anybody can imagine. And that is what the New Testament promises, So the idea of the New Testament is this hippie thing. You can't be very peaceful if your deterrent for everything is eternal hellfire and torture and damnation and burning and all of that. So all of these things they're really, really vile.
So any other funny ones to change?
I have a question.
The funny ones. Yeah.
What do you guys find the most contradictory two verses in the Quran?
Well,
oh man, how many hours do we have?
well, actually,
where to begin?
almost in most surahs start with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and also starts with also keeps on reminding you about how much God is going to punish you and how much God is going to torture you, how much lead they're going to pour molten lead down your throat. I mean,
have you heard of tough love?
And you have to love him and fear him at the same time.
Here's the thing: it kind of like it talks like the Quran talks like Trump. It doesn't say it doesn't say like I'm merciful. It's like I'm the most merciful. I'm the most forgiving.
Nobody's as merciful as me.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Like that's how God talks in the Quran.
But I actually have an answer to this that's very relevant to the times, and that is, I think the most contradictory verses. I'll name two instances. One is Surah 2, verse 256, which is there is no compulsion in religion. A lot of people recognize this because this is what the moderates. It's one of their favorite verses to quote. It's like, hey, the Psalm says there's no compulsion. They just talk about Surah 2, 256. So anytime somebody tells you that, as to everybody out there, please read the next verse. And the next verse says that if you do choose to disbelieve, there's no compulsion. If you do choose to disbelieve, then you're going to be pretty much burned and tortured for all eternity. The second one is where it says that he who saves one life has saved all of mankind. He who kills one person has killed all of mankind. That's Surah.
Read the next verse there too.
That's again Surah 5, verse 32. Read 5:33, and it'll talk about how people who are charged with what they call corruption, which could be as much as like insulting the prophet, whatever. It could be something really mild. Those people, they'll be crucified. It says they will be crucified, and their limbs cut from opposite sides.
Then people say, when they in defense of that, people say this is not about all corruption, as if like people insulting Muhammad. It was about at the time, at that specific place, Muhammad was fighting the enemies. It was about the opposing army. It's not, you can't just apply it to everybody that does corruption. They're saying that you have to read it in context at what was happening at the time. How do you
I don't think that's, I'll tell you one example, one reason why that's not true. Okay. Sorry, Yas, did you want to say something?
No, I was gonna You're probably going to say what I was going to say. Continue.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. In the Quran, there's a verse, the very famous verse, one of the two verses that mentions how you should behead disbelievers, and that's Surah 8, verse 12, right? And what that says is that remember that when your Lord inspired to the angels, I am with you, so strengthen those who have believed. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieved, so strike them upon the necks and strike from them every fingertip. And we were talking about adrubu before, the word daraba, that also appears here, the word strike. So this is a verse that, and I was actually on the agenda with Steve Paikin, I think maybe about a year and a half ago, with Shabir Ali, who's this sort of Canadian Islamic scholar. And I quoted this to him, and then he said exactly what I knew he was going to say. He's like, no, that was in the Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr was one of the first battles that Muhammad fought with the Meccans.
Yeah.
And sometimes we call it Operation Mecca Freedom.
Right. So what happened? Operation Mecca Freedom. So the people from Mecca were the Muhammad's army was outnumbered largely. So apparently the angels came in and they helped the small number of people fight the Quraysh, which was a bigger army of the disbelievers, and these angels they cast terror into the hearts of the disbelievers, so that they went around beheading and cutting their fingertips off. So he said that was specific to that war because they were defending themselves. I was like, yeah, but the problem is the very next verse. Surah 8, verse 13, which says that is because they opposed Allah and his messenger, and whoever opposes Allah and his messenger, indeed Allah is severe in penalty. So even though that is about Badr, the Quran is using it as an example for all time. It's like, what happened here in Badr? If you meet people like this, whoever opposes Allah and his messenger,
well,
at any time,
what if I
they're
say
going to
it
get the
means if
same
you
penalty.
meet people like this at that time? Like,
well, you wouldn't need that verse. It's redundant because that's already
How did he respond?
There.
How did he respond when you said that?
He didn't respond. Then Steve Paikin jumped in. He's like, how do you know all this stuff? I know it's his job to know, but how do you know? I was like, well, because I read it. That's why I'm an atheist. You know, and it was a funny moment. But
I would have liked to hear his response to that. That would, because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to see what do you think a Muslim apologist would respond?
Usually, it's a lot of waffling, and it's really interesting that. Yeah, waffle. I think that whenever you do quote the next one of the responses I'll hear. So here's an example let's go back to that, when it says no compulsion in religion, the very next verse says you're going to go to hell. They'd be like, well, if there's no compulsion and you'd already decided not to believe, then why would you be afraid of hell? Because you're not going to believe anyway, so you don't believe in hell. Why are you afraid of it?
Yeah.
That's usually the counter argument. Another place this counter argument shows up is in
but
Surah
the point is that we're not talking about us here. We're talking about the God, right? We're talking about the Quran, right? So like,
right.
when they say that, I'm not the subject of discussion. We're criticizing this book, and this book, it says you either believe or you go to hell. And like, well, why do you care? If you don't believe in hell, why do you care if it tells you you're going to hell? Yeah, we're not talking about me. We're talking,
Yeah, you know what's funny is like Surah 5, Surah Ma'idah, verses 72 and 73, it says that anybody who believes in the Trinity or that God was the son of Mary is a blasphemer, is a disbeliever, and they're going to go to hell forever, right? So it essentially means all Christians.
Yeah.
So basically, people say the same thing.
Yeah, it actually tells you that all Christians go to heaven because they're Ahlul Book unless they believe in the Trinity. So basically, I don't know where.
I love when you do stuff like that, Armin.
No, the reason for that, Armin, that there is actually defense for that. And the reason for that is that whenever it talks about Christians who go to heaven in the Quran, every single time, that's Christians who have converted to Islam, who've updated to 2.0, right, or 3.0. So
if they're non-Muslim, they don't count.
So, but if they still believe in the Trinity or that God was the son of Mary, then they're all going to go to hell. So what they say is like, if you don't believe in hell, then why do you think that should be offensive to Christians? Well, the reason is because if you believe that this is God's word, if you're in Pakistan, in a village in Pakistan, you believe that this is the word of God himself, and this is what God is saying about Christians. How are you going to look at the Christians in your thing? You're like, okay, like God wants to send them to hell forever.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to do anything to these people.
But also,
Yeah.
if there is, true. But even if it didn't cause people to behave differently, and even if even though we don't believe in hell, we're criticizing the book, right? We're
Mhm.
not talking. We're just saying this book doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter if there is a hell or not. It's just inconsistent.
Exactly.
We're just showing its inconsistencies.
Yeah.
By the way, yes. Do we have any questions from our patrons before we go on?
No, I'm laughing at somebody, Wendell, who said Lot's wife was so salty to her daughters after they date raped. So God turned her to salt.
Oh,
and
God.
answered prayer. Sorry.
Ouch.
Uh,
Well
That's
done,
a
Wendell.
mess.
Well
yeah.
done.
It's so salty.
Speaking of that, now I remember this because you are talking about the non-believers and believers, and that's one of the questions that I asked when I just hit puberty. Was
That was their hobby. That, by the way, was Faisal's hobby. He's very good at puberty.
yeah,
Yeah.
No.
He still practices it often.
yeah, once in a while. So it's the concept of a predetermination, right? So on one verse, the وَمَسَخْنَا قُلُوبَهُم, like it says, like God already instilled disbelief in the heart of the disbelievers, okay? And on the other hand, he's saying gonna put them to hell for choosing not to believe. Okay,
Make up your mind.
what the fuck is going on? It's like
He's setting us up for failure.
Yeah, so he's setting you up for failure, and then he punish you. So I remember I asked my Islamic teacher, he said, if somebody is born non-believer and God already knew that he's going to be a non-believer, how does it make sense that he's going to punish
a dick
them?
Move.
Yeah, how's it going to make sense? He's going to punish them while he made them non-believers. I mean, he actually said...
It's like making women,
Faisal,
it's like making women have their period and then not allowing them to pray,
and
then saying you're less in religion because you can't pray.
But Faisal, you didn't read the
blah, blah.
translation. Can you read the translation of the verse that you just mentioned? Because that makes all the difference.
Why should I don't know.
How does it make a difference?
No English, okay?
So basically,
I don't know.
No, what God is saying is that
$2. One falafel, $2.
Okay, are you gonna read it?
I still remember when the U.S. Army came into Iraq, and there was this shops set up by children, and they were like, Mister, chocolate $2, apple to $1, apple $1, chocolate $2.
Oh, that's so cute.
It's like it's that simple.
Huh.
I mean, I don't know I'm not like Ali. I don't know everything by verse and by chapter. All I remember is
just
that the thing, like God said, like we inserted disbelief in their hearts. Maybe you can Google it, Armin. You have a desktop. It's like it says he inserted disbelief in their hearts. وَمَسَخْنَا قُلُوبَهُم. Like it's like kind of like we inserted like a hardware.
Cleaned, yeah.
No, not clean. It's
wiped it.
Yeah, he installed virus.
antivirus.
Yeah,
antivirus.
he installed the virus in their hearts. Okay.
Oh,
that make them non-believers. Okay, and then he gonna punish them for being non-believers. Like, what the fuck, man? Like,
that's kind of mean. That's not nice.
Yeah, that's not nice.
That's not nice. That's not Rahman or Rahim. Actually, that's just douchey.
The Bible also says that about Ramesses, I think, in the Old Testament.
The Bible says everything that's in, like blasphemy, like Leviticus 24:16 actually says that blasphemers should all go to the whole blasphemy law and everything. It's actually really brutal in the Bible. It says everything. It says that people don't take the Bible seriously. People still take the Quran seriously. I think that's going to change very, very slowly.
Okay.
Okay, so just for a fun thing, can I tell you one of my favorite verses in the Quran? It's really short and it's really cute. It's Surah 2, verse 138. It says, "Ours is a religion of Allah," right? And who is better than Allah at coloring? It says, "We take our color from Allah, and who is better than Allah at coloring?" That's so sweet. Like, no, it says that. Like, look it up. Quran 2, 138. right? We take our color from Allah, and who is better than Allah at coloring? And I want to pose that question to the rest of my fellow. So it's like, who is better than Allah at coloring?
Who indeed?
Not me. I sucked at coloring.
I know. Yeah, I was pretty bad too. I kept on going outside the line. But Allah apparently is.
Actually, in first grade school, I didn't have a green pencil, and I mixed my blue colors and my yellow colors. And my teacher was so proud. Even though I went all out of the line, she took my square that I was supposed to paint, colored in green, and she showed the whole class that what did I do when I don't have a green pencil. I tried.
So we have our answer. We have the answer to this verse.
Yeah.
Who is better at Allah than at coloring? It's like Armin Navabi, the founder of Atheist Republic. That's who it is. Anyway, I just thought that was cute. I always looked at that verse and I was like, oh.
You're watching like a little God painting the world.
I know, yeah. It was just like, when God was a kid. Like when you see baby pictures of, people, even like Hitler, and you look at it like, oh my God, he's a cute kid. What the hell happened? It's like that. Yeah, just. All
right, I have some verses if you guys don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Please.
All right, so this is about these two verses. Even though they don't mention Aisha and Zainab, they are about Aisha and Zainab, and the only way to figure out it's about Aisha and Zainab is if you look at the hadith and the stories around. But if you just read the Quran, you have no clue what they're talking about. In fact,
I think it's Aisha and Hafsa.
No, I'm talking about two different verses, right?
Okay.
But I'm trying to make it one point with.
Did you say kapsa? I like kapsa.
No, go ahead. Okay, Armin, go ahead.
All right. So I don't know if people listen to our previous episodes, they know about the story of Aisha, where she lost her necklace in the desert, and because she was, taking a piss or something. And then, no, this is true. I'm not making fun of Aisha.
I know.
But. And then when she came back, she realized that the necklace she was
tinkling. She's a girl.
The necklace that Muhammad gave to her as a gift was missing, right? So, and that was very precious to her. So she went back to find it, but then the whole caravan left because she's so light. They didn't feel that she wasn't in the box that they carry her. I don't know what those things are called, but they went and she was left in the desert, and she didn't follow the caravan. Because she felt like she's so much higher, like she's the wife of the freaking prophet. I'm not going to run after them, even though they're very slow. She just sat there for them to come after her, but they didn't come after her because they didn't know she was missing. So she just sat there, and eventually this guy on a camel came, and he saw that this is the wife of the prophet, so he's not going to leave her alone. So he grabbed her and they put her on a camel and went to the caravan. And when he got to the caravan, that looked really, really bad. The wife of a prophet, another man having his arms around her and just showing up there. So a lot of rumors flew around, and this was very devastating. This is basically started the Shia-Sunni divide, because when the rumors got around, Ali suggested to Muhammad that he should just divorce Aisha. And Abu Bakr was there when he suggested that, and Abu Bakr,
he got pissed.
Yeah, Abu Bakr was Aisha's father, and this is basically the divide between Abu Bakr and Ali, and Aisha and Ali. Aisha eventually waged a war on Ali when Muhammad dies. And then
basically Jamal, the camel war, the war of the camel.
Yeah. So this is basically where people that follow Abu Bakr, Umar, and Osman are different from people that always think that Ali should have been Muhammad's successor. So it was all because Aisha lost her necklace. Anyways, but the thing is that when Ali made this...
it's true.
Yeah. All these people are dying over something so stupid.
All these people in Yemen are right now, malnutrition in Yemen, Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen, Iran, Saudi Arabia in war, and all this people being bombed in mosques by Al-Qaeda, all of this because Aisha lost her necklace.
Hang on to your jewelry.
Listen, Armin, this is about politics and economics, not religion.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
But
hashtag Noam Chomsky.
But this verse that comes...
I found it.
What? What?
It's even got one of Aisha's hair is. Oh no, that's Elishma's hair. Never mind, forget it.
Anyways,
Uh-huh.
so this verse
DNA
comes in the
testing.
Quran and mentions this is 24:4. So it says, and those who accuse. Wait, I'm gonna read one of these better translations because this translation is not very.
It's fake news.
Yeah, it is.
No, the translation, authentic, good translations are very important.
Just
And
okay.
I would urge people
and those who
yeah.
accuse honorable women but bring not 4 witnesses. Scourge,
there it is.
scourge, yeah. So scourge them with 80 stripes and never afterward accept their testimony. They indeed are evildoers, right? So,
And this is why there's no rape in Sharia countries.
well, there is rape on it, but you have to have 4 witnesses, right? But which is really hard to do because impossible to do. And this basically in a lot of places leads to when women try to tell like come and mention that somebody has raped them, they end up sometimes actually being accused of adultery because they can't produce 4 witnesses. So not only
that's because rape. Yeah.
But
Go ahead.
yeah, but you're
But no, just one clarification. That actually happens even in places like Dubai. By the way,
yes,
there have been stories in Dubai and Doha about this. It's not just like some place like in the middle of Sudan that has this issue. This is like actually widespread.
No, but that's because this is a Quranic issue. There is no rape. There's no word for rape.
Yes.
In the Quran. There's the word for zina, which means illegal sex. It's used for both adultery and rape. Consent is completely immaterial because it's written from the point of view of men.
All right.
So rape does not exist in the Quran.
So a second story, there's another verse I want to mention, but before I mention this verse, I have to mention the story behind it. By the way, this shows you that these verses, like each one of them just came randomly. Like if you read the Quran, it doesn't actually make any sense because sometimes a verse comes and then 2 years you don't have a verse and then the next verse comes and there's a lot of stories behind that verse. So if you just read it, it's just like random gibberish, but you have to actually read the stories behind these verses, right? So the story behind the second verse that I'm going to mention is...
And this is the context, by the way. When they say that it's out of context, what Armin's providing here is the actual context, which often makes the verses a lot worse than what you think they are. It does the opposite.
So Zayd was... is Muhammad's adopted son, but before he was his adopted son, he was Muhammad's slave. It was before he was Muhammad's slave, it was Khadija's slave, which was given.
It was given to her as a gift, wedding gift.
It was a wedding. Zayd was a wedding gift to Khadija, which was then given to Muhammad, and Muhammad freed him eventually and adopted him as his son. And there's this girl named Zainab, which Muhammad gave to Zayd as a bride. And Zainab didn't want that because Zainab was a Quraysh member. Quraysh was this really well-known tribe, and Zayd was a former slave, so that's really wasn't really nice. But then when Muhammad wanted something to really happen, a verse would come down, and a verse came down again in the Quran, and then Zainab said, "Fine, whatever," and then they got married. But then at one point, Muhammad noticed by accident, because she was uncovered, how attractive Zainab is. And he was very attracted to her, but marrying, and Zayd, when he went home and he was very upset that he noticed how attractive Zainab was, and Zainab mentions this to Zayd, and Zayd really didn't like Zainab. So when Zayd goes to Muhammad, he's like, if you really want her, you could have her, there's no problem. I just divorced her and you could marry her. But Muhammad really didn't want to do that because Zayd was considered Muhammad's son, and this around that time was kind of like incest. Like it was very looked down upon for you to marry your former son's wife.
Your son's
former wife.
Sorry, thank you. For your son's former wife.
Biologically, you still can't do it in Islam. You can't marry your son's former wife.
Yes,
that's why the adoption rules came. But go ahead.
Yeah, the adoption rules came too. But then this verse came down. It's 33:37. That so when Zayd had this is the second part of the verse, which says, so when Zayd had no longer any need for her, we married her to you, by you, the God means Muhammad. Because, by the way, remember, when you're reading the Quran, whenever it says you, the Quran is kind of like a dialogue between God and Muhammad, and you're just listening into a dialogue. That's how you should read it. So we married her to you in order that there not be Okay, so we married her to you in order that there not be upon the believers any discomfort concerning the
Any
wives,
discount.
any discomfort concerning the wives of their adopted sons when they no longer have need of them, and ever is the command of Allah accomplished. So this is another verse that shows, like, Muhammad was kind of like feeling uneasy, like that Aisha verse and this verse, and there's a whole other bunch of verses that it doesn't, like, a lot of people that are pro, as trying to being Islamic apologetic, make it seem like these verses would have there's some master plan into it for all time and all places. But also a lot of people that are very anti-Islam always make Muhammad to seem to be like this evil monster that came up with these verses to destroy mankind, right? But if you actually read it, it just seems like Muhammad was just tackling one problem at a time. Like he wasn't.
This is like his daily.
And he also
like
just
Jerry
wanted
Springer
to have. He wanted to fuck everything all the time.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, like, it's not like all these consequences of these verses. Like now, these poor women that are trying to get people report rape and they get accused of adultery, and then these adoptions law now that we have in Islam. These were not some master plan of. These are just consequences of Muhammad just trying to figure out how I could get people convinced
how he can get away with what he wants to do.
Exactly.
And he doesn't want to believe that his daughter or his wife, his 9-year-old wife, I guess she wasn't 9 at the time, but whatever, his favorite wife, he didn't want to believe that she was sleeping around. So he's like, no, I need to have 4 witnesses.
Yes.
So it's like it's childish, but I don't think that he envisioned that, over 1,000 years later,
How the concept.
he was going to be this carte blanche for all of these people to be raping women.
What Yas mentioned is something that I should have mentioned. With the verse came that is the forced witnesses. The reason why that verse came down is because to show that Aisha didn't commit any kind of adultery with that, because everybody was accusing Aisha. So Muhammad was like, either give me 4 witnesses or shut the fuck up. If you can't give me 4 witnesses, then you're going to be punished. And Aisha is based. And actually, Aisha and Zainab.
So you raise the threshold.
Yeah, and Aisha and Zainab actually were fighting with each other at one time, and they used these verses against each other because Zainab was like saying, I'm the only woman that God himself married her to the Muhammad. Like, no man married me to Muhammad. God married me to Muhammad. Like, unlike all the other wives, right? And Aisha responded, I'm the only woman that God brought testimony to her innocence, right? So these are the only 2 women that the verses came down, even though they were the only woman that is mentioned by name in the Quran is Mother Mary. So these verses are about these 2 women, but their name themselves is never mentioned. Zayd is mentioned, but Zainab is not mentioned.
Yeah. So one of the other consequences of this actually has to do with the adoption rules. So what happened here is Zayd was his adopted son. So Muhammad could not marry the ex-wife, the divorcee of his biological son. So what he did was, because he wanted to marry Zayd's divorcee, he created these rules about adoption, that an adopted kid cannot take the name of his father. If he's adopted, he can't. There's a very clear distinction. The inheritance and all of these rules, they affect the adoption. And this has caused a lot of problems. Like in places like Pakistan, you can't, the adopted daughter of a man is not considered mahram. When you want to, like, it, even the guardianship rules and everything, all of that has changed. There's a taboo. Adoption has a taboo and a stigma associated with it. So there are a lot of kids that are out there that people won't adopt. They'll spend like hundreds of thousands of, whatever the rupees or, whatever currency it is, depending on which country you're in, on infertility treatments, but they just won't adopt. Right? Because it's loaded with all that stigma. And the reason it's loaded with all that stigma is because the prophet was just very attracted to this one woman who happened to be married to his adopted son, and he wanted to marry her after they got divorced. So it's just one of those, like Armin is saying, like just one of those daily things, like, okay, how I really want to do this, I don't know how to do it.
I really want to do this, and then just, by chance, God is like, hey, you know what? I have a new verse for you, and it just happens to coincide with exactly what it is that you wanted to do.
1,400 years later, there are all these unwanted kids who don't have families because of those stigmas. So this stuff, I mean, it has very, very serious consequences.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. I think that, to his defense, I don't know if it's to his defense, and so did Jesus. I mean, nobody knew about Christianity if it was not for Constantine, right? Like Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, and then Christianity spread like wildfire, and now it's the biggest religion in the world, right? Islam is the second. I don't think that Jesus even knew that his stories, assuming that he existed.
I think Mary, before Jesus even, I think Mary would be really surprised.
Yeah.
She'd be like, you guys are still buying that shit?
Yeah. Like, I just didn't want to get in trouble. I was 16 and my husband was going to kill me.
Yeah.
But so you guys just created a whole religion out of it.
I created a Jesus gate, right? Like a Pizza Gate story. So, and then I don't think even Muhammad knew. I mean, those who spread the prophet, the message of Islam, were actually his successors.
Basically, Omar was the main one who conquered large amounts of land. Like he was
actually Omar and Osman together are the Constantine of Muhammad. Omar because he spread it, and Osman because he canonized the Quran, just like Constantine did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a very good analogy.
And then the Umayyad came in, and then they spread all over. And then the Abbasid came in, and they spread all over to the way that became conquered
herpes.
Third of the planet, like the 1/3 I don't think so. Back at the time, but let's be honest. People grew up in the desert faster. Don't you know that? Don't you know that? I mean, this is the main argument I've heard about Aisha. I was like, oh, how do you think of it? Like, well, don't you know that women grow up faster in the desert? And maybe the desert helped Muhammad to marry all these women. I mean, the thing is, the biggest argument against polygamy is having more than one mother-in-law. So that so Muhammad had to deal with all these mother-in-laws. He need to have superpowers, for God's sake. He really needed, this is what convinced me that he was really a prophet, because how can he deal with all these mother-in-laws? And so
it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle by itself. Leave all the marriages aside.
Miracle in law.
He had 13 wives at one point, did he? Or was it 13 in total?
He had 11 wives in total, but he had 2 concubines, slave girls. So that's another thing about
Maria al-Qibtiyya. There is Maria al-Qibtiyya, which is the Egyptian Christian Coptic woman. Yeah, the Coptic Egyptian woman.
Yeah, and then there's Rihanna bint Zayd, and so there.
Rihanna was not involved in this. Neither is Beyonce.
No, Rihanna. No, not that Rihanna. That's who she was named after. But now that we're talking about this is another thing. So the Quran does allow, in several places, it says all women are forbidden for you except for your wives and ma malakat aymanukum, which is the girls that you're right. Which is your slaves or your captives. So I wanted to actually bring up another verse that I think is pretty wild. It's Surah 4 against Surah An-Nisa. Nisa means women. It says chapter 4 of the Quran, and it starts by saying
binders full of women.
Yeah, binders full of women. Mitt Romney in magic underwear. So 423 actually talks about all of the women you can't marry, your sisters, your mothers, your sisters-in-law, blah blah blah. Then 424 says, and also prohibited to you are all married women, except those your right hands possess. This means that if you have captives of war or slaves that are already married, you can still have sex with them.
Yeah, that's Sophia, isn't it?
Some people say you can't have sex with them, but you can marry them, because later on in the verse it says marrying and so on. But either way, even if they're already married, if you captured them in war and their husbands are somewhere else, but they're your captives, you can marry them, you can have sex with them, and people say, well, it's by consent, but they're your slaves. Your slaves cannot, by definition, consent. So,
I still
this
remember.
is essentially.
I still remember when I first read that. If I remember correctly, it's except in one verse, and then it starts the rest in the next verse, right? So when I first read the verse and it says except, I like, how could this possibly end? How could you? Because it's saying except you cannot have sex with married women, of course, Islam, right? Except, like, what? Except so
there are certain kinds of married women you can
have sex with, like, what? And then it gets worse. Like, if you capture them in the war against enemies of Allah, that's the only way you can have sex with married women.
Right. And so a lot of people say, well, you got to look at the context behind this. And, you got to look at the context. And I'm just going to refer, I'm not going to go into the details, but so what I did was I actually did that in my book. If you go to chapter 7 of my book, there's a whole section on this verse 424. And in the footnotes, there are some of the major hadith that talk about why this happened. And there was a war. There were many married women. And the army of Muhammad, they didn't want to go near them because they were married. And then Muhammad eventually got this revelation, 424, that said, okay, now you can go ahead.
All the time.
I mean,
you can go ahead.
The easiest question for me to ask this apologetics, I mean, so it's sex slavery we're talking about, right? Which context do you think sex slavery should be allowed? I mean, let's talk about context.
Faisal, just really quick, I just want to say that this is sex slavery, the term that Faisal used, what ISIS is doing. What we just mentioned here is that this is actually legal in the Quran. Just want to point that out. It's actually legal. Sex slavery is in the Quran. It's endorsed. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and speaking of recent events that, while we're recording this, there was an attack on a church in Egypt that happened one day ago, and I was doing some research on this, and actually Al-Azhar University, which is considered I would say one of the main schools of Sunni Islam, or at least one of the main schools of thought, have actually had a book about destroying churches and synagogues. So what ISIS did is actually also endorsed by Al-Azhar.
Yeah, it is.
So it's so all these people who say that, this has nothing to do with Islam. Well, it definitely has nothing to do with every Muslim. Not every Muslim believes.
No, it doesn't have to do with most Muslims. Most Muslims are way, like as Alishba says, most humans are more moral than the religions that they hold sacred.
Scriptures that they hold.
Scriptures that they hold sacred. I'm sorry, Armin.
Yeah, I mean,
I need to. I'm embarrassed. I should know this.
And also,
so most humans are more moral than the scriptures that they hold sacred.
Because there's also all these logistics that I think that, I mean, now we don't live in a time in which people invade countries and by this and start using people as captives.
Yeah, but it's the perfect religion for all people for all time.
Yeah, I mean, just think of the latest wars, like the Iraq-Iran war. How often that the people went into villages, and it was mostly between two armies, right? It's the Iraqi army versus the Iranian army. There's no situations in which people go into lands and start raping, hide your wives, hide your kids. They're raping everyone out here. Do you know this video? It's one of my favorite videos on YouTube. You gotta
hide your kids, hide your wives, because they be raping everybody up in here.
They're raping everybody out here. I mean, other than in that complex or in wars that happened in the 5th century, it's very unlikely that you would have situations in which you go start raping people by the thousands in the war.
I
mean, the problem is, go ahead.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Can I mention something about that all out of context, metaphor, not literal thing? I mean, this is supposed to be a book that is supposed to save us from the fires of hell, right? And it's supposed to be understood by all men and all women at all times with whatever education that they have, right? It's supposed to be simple and easy to at some point, if you keep reading it and people see it and you read it the way we are, you have to, if it was supposed to mean something else, you have to question the capability of the author to be able to write something for people to understand what he actually meant to say, right? I mean, if you go to if you go to, let's say your building is on fire and you're trying to get out, you're trying to save yourself from fire, and you go out and you're trying to read the instruction of where the exit is, and it's in poetry and it's a metaphor, and you have to kind of read it right, and you're like, dude, anybody with on the right mind could see that this is going to get people burned at some point, right? So if this instructions for you finding the exit, if it's not clear and people end up getting burned, if that's if that not being clear is immoral, a book that is supposed to save you from an eternal fire, it's not being clear, it's speaking in metaphor. If it's people reading it and coming up with different meaning of it, that, even if you're trying to be very, very, gracious, you're trying to give God the benefit of the doubt and be like, he was trying to be kind, but he's the creator of all world and he's all knowing. He should have been able to know how to write a book that was easier to understand, that was more clear, and would get to the point in a way that it wasn't so much confusion around it, right?
Yeah, especially since he created our minds and he knows how we think, and he's supposed to know everything, so he knew this was going to happen too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I think we need to wrap up soon so we don't exhaust our audience.
Ali was saying something and I cut him off. Sorry.
Yeah, and actually,
I was saying that
I have a recommendation, which I hope he's gonna be our future guest. So, Patreons, if you like, please donate. Keep donating, because hopefully, so there is this famous Egyptian scholar called Hamid Abdul Samad, and Hamid has a show called the Books of Islam, Sanduq al-Islam, which is unfortunately only in Arabic right now. And this guy takes the Quran from cover to cover. Every story, every verse, he tells the whole context and everything. I mean, I would recommend everyone to watch it if you speak Arabic. If you don't, go back to your country. But it is hopefully
but it's subtitled. I think doesn't memory usually subtitle?
Sometimes, yeah, but these are Jews, So just a disclaimer, actually memory is owned by a former officer of the Mossad. That's actually true.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is Memory TV. This is a YouTube. It's an online thing where they actually collect and subtitle in English, translate stuff from Arabic speaking channels.
Yeah, so like whenever I share something on memory, like some of my Arab friends, they're like, "Oh, it's owned by the Mossad," so this discredit all the things said on memory.
Who cares? It's not like they're creating the content; they're just sharing it.
It's actual real content.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're speaking too much logic. So Hamid Abdul Samad, if you guys are interested, hopefully we're gonna have him on the show. I already talked to him about having him, and maybe we would probably do a show with him that talks in details about all these issues. Do you guys have anything left before I?
Yeah, I think Yaz should get Yaz. I didn't, do you have a last verse especially as a woman, since the Quran talks so much about your people?
Well,
anything that
as a woman of color, what does the Quran say about
anything lighthearted and fun about women that you found amusing and made you laugh?
There's quite a few hadith and verses from the Quran that get thrown in a woman's face all the time. One of them we already talked about was verse 434, right? Men are responsible. That gets thrown in your face all the fucking time. So that just means that men are responsible for women or above women or guardians of women, however you want to translate it. But basically, you are inferior to men. And then, of course, he can hit you if he's afraid that you're going to be disobedient. If your husband wants to sleep with you, you have to sleep with him. Otherwise, the angels are going to curse you all night until the morning. So there's no such thing as
that's a hadith,
rape.
Right? I think
that's hadith. So there's no such thing as marital rape, because you just have to agree whether you want to or not.
There's one that even says that if your husband calls you, you have to go to him, even if you're at the stove.
Yeah. There's another one, even if you're on a camel. Even if
Jesus.
you're riding through the desert and your husband's horny.
I know.
Sorry.
That's
Yeah.
what you got to do. Yeah.
So,
Verse
yeah, and then so he can beat you,
220.
he can rape you, you basically.
I have a question
Yeah,
for
there's-
you. Maybe that you can answer it.
Oh, and then
before.
women are less intelligent than men, and women are going to be much more in hellfire than men will be. Like there's
Half the testimony.
population,
Mhm.
half the testimony.
Oh,
half
and half the testimony is
inheritance.
that's actually the Surah 2 verse 228. The only reason I'm doing this is because for people who want to look it up, I want you to go out. I urge you to go and look up the translation of your choice, and the interpretations of your choice and the commentary of your choice. But yeah, Surah 2 verse 228 actually says that the word of a woman is half that of a man, because if one makes a mistake, the other can correct her. That's why you need 2 women instead of 1 man. And just 5 verses before that, I think in 222, it says that menstruation is an illness. So stay away from women when they're menstruating.
Yeah.
That's also a nice, fun one. Yeah.
Yes. So actually, I have a question for you before we finish, because I've actually been asked a question, I think about a day ago. Yeah. What do you think of Muslim feminism? That's an answer. Okay. Have a nice day, guys. Yeah. So you know Banat Tahawi? She's a fellow Egyptian.
What do you
Yes,
think
I
of
do.
Jewish Nazis?
Yeah. Good question.
Because that is actually, I mean, that is being popping up quite a lot. They say that, like, look at how Islam is feminist. Muhammad married Khadija, she was a businesswoman.
That's because it was before Islam, but anyway.
Yeah, so they say, like, look at the example of Khadija and Muhammad. He married a businesswoman. He never married anyone else until she died. This is a sign that
all of that is true, actually. But I think what happened before was, even if you look at the Meccan surahs, Muhammad was actually, he was kind of like Gandhi. You know what Gandhi started out? He was very idealistic, non-violent, this and that. And then later on, he became part of the system. Yeah, he became part of the system. And then he became, he did become a bit of an ass later on. And I think with Muhammad it was the same way. Like the guy, like he was raised by his mother. He was raised by his mother. His father died before he was born. He went to his grandfather. He had a wet nurse, Halima, raised him. He had all these women in his life. And then he had Khadija, who was older than him, 15 years older. She was his boss. She financially supported him. She was essentially, she proposed to him too. So it was all pretty much in reverse. And she wasn't a virgin at all, right? And she married him and he was with her.
Didn't Khadija's lineage come from, like, at least half of it came from Medina? Like, she had people.
Oh, I don't know about that, actually.
Well,
I don't know.
here's the thing, though.
I thought she came from Vermont.
No, but the idea is that, like, later on, what happened is after she died, and then when he became a statesman, and he wasn't the idealist who used to do all those good deeds,
then he's raping little girls.
Then the same kind of thing happened to him that happened to all the communist revolutionaries, right? They started out all idealistic and, it's all about the people and everything. And then later on, when they got the power, they just got
to be fair, most people, when you get so powerful and everybody's praising you, it gets to your head, right? I mean, it's hard to assume it's not going to affect him. But to be fair to Muhammad, to be really fair to him, one thing he never turned his back on was the orphans, right? Like, to the very...
He was one, right?
Because he himself...
from to the very end, he was always... Like, he went from being really pro-Jewish to very hating the Jewish people. And to be fair to him, his anti-Jewish feelings were not racist, were ideological, right? Because any Jew that became Muslim, he would put them on a pedestal, right? Like, he would love the Jews that became Muslim. So it wasn't a race thing at all. It was completely ideological. But he always cared about the poor and the orphans. But another thing...
Well, zakah is a really nice concept, actually, generally. Whatever you think about Islam, zakah, the idea that every year there's a compulsory part of what you make that should go to charity is actually a wonderful concept.
Yeah.
It's called a flat income tax.
The reason why I mentioned Khadija was from half her lineage, I think, was from Medina, is because women were treated differently in Mecca than in Medina. Like, people in Mecca treated their women much worse than I mean, Medina, like even when Omar mentioned to Muhammad that these are women in Medina, when we're living in Medina, they're becoming so full of themselves. They think they're speaking out of, without permission, because they're learning from all these Madani women, and they're not listening to us anymore. So we have to make sure they behave, because Madani women were a little bit more independent than Mecca women. I'm just saying, in Saudi Arabia, like a lot of people, both on pro-Islam and anti-Islam, when they try to make it seem like Muhammad made things better or worse, they make it seem like all of Saudi Arabia was the same. But it really depends on where you're looking at Saudi Arabia, right? Like Khadija was a businesswoman, and she had her own, like she had her own trade business going on, right?
Before
Islam, right? But to be fair to Muhammad, the practice of burying daughters alive was completely gotten rid of because of Muhammad, right? So that was a common practice. People in Mecca, when they want a son, if they had daughters,
they cite that as a feminist concept. So Muhammad was a feminist.
Well, also the women being allowed to own property and inherit property, right? That was another one, that they could inherit property. But a lot of that actually came from
mention
Khadija
to
too.
people what we're talking about, because before Muhammad, the time of Jahl, people, when they had daughters, if they didn't want it, they would just bury them alive, right? And Muhammad didn't like that at all, right? And he stopped it. Here's the point, though. Let's say Muhammad made a lot of things better, right? The point is that the standards at that time is so low that is not good enough for us, right? You can't, I don't know if I buy into the idea that he was very progressive. He might have been. Let's say he was progressive for his time. A progressive for his time means shit at all for now, right? Because we have our ethics, our moral system has evolved way more than that, and Islam is supposed to be a religion for all time, for every person at all time. So if just because like the Ahlul Jah, the standards is a very low bar.
That means the
for us.
time of ignorance.
The time of ignorance standard is a very low bar for us to have as a standard, right? Just because you're better than them doesn't mean that it's acceptable today.
An analogy to that is actually, and I talk about this often, is the Thomas Jefferson. If you look at Thomas Jefferson, he was a founding father, lived hundreds of years ago. He was a slave owner. He wrote the words, all men are created equal, but he used to own slaves. He even had a 14-year-old slave girl that he had sex with when he was in his 40s. And he had children with her, right, for many years after that. So now he did that. If you talk about it today, like, we give him a pass. We're like, okay, what he did was screwed up, because at that time, all the founding fathers had slaves, and they all used to talk about equality. They were all hypocrites in that way. But we let that go because they never claimed infallibility. They never claimed that what they were doing was for all time. So we took their work and we moved it forward. If someone came up, and if there were people walking around today defending Thomas Jefferson's affair with a child, or defending Thomas Jefferson's slave
and saying
ownership,
we need to be like him, we need to emulate him because he's such a wonderful man, so I also must,
and because he
children.
had God-given divinity, and we must emulate his example for all time, then you can bet people would have huge problems with Thomas Jefferson. We would be skewering him just like we are right now. So people can be very progressive for their age and their time, but infallibility, divinity, these things change everything. The moment you bring those claims into it, you automatically you're going to be scrutinized by a whole different standard, right?
Yeah, and that brings up the end of our episode. Because I don't want our episodes to go longer than what they like, for hours.
8 inches. Sorry. Yeah, 2 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, well, hopefully we're gonna continue to do some of these episodes. If we're gonna interview Hamid or some other future Muslim scholars in the future, that we're probably gonna debate some of them on these issues, and our audience can listen to the apologetics arguments coming from the apologetics themselves, other than have us to be speaking on their behalf. Even though I'd always like to speak on other people's behalf, because I'm the Khalifa.
That's right.
So Thank you everyone for watching, and if you are listening, please spread the word, share it everywhere. Comment. If you have some money, give us some of your money. I want to buy falafels.
Rate us. Give us a rating on iTunes. Is it, Armin?
Yep.
Yes, and please don't rate us 9/11, because we're not responsible for 9/11.
Another one.
So thank you very much for listening, and may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
And thank you to Max for being our awesome sound guy and always taking care of us.
Thank you.
And thank you to our wonderful patrons for joining us.
All right. Have a good night. Ciao. Ma'a salama.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Secular Jihadists have been made possible thanks to the gracious support of the Illuminati and the great state of Israel. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. In the meantime, we greatly appreciate the support of our current donors. Please consider supporting by sharing the podcast with your fellow heathens or by donating at patreon.com/SJME.